Today, I'm not talking with a designer. I'm talking with a homeowner, someone whose story warrants an entire episode. Michael Bartz has been living in a tiny home with his partner and three cats, which he built himself. His goal seemed simple enough. He wanted to live more sustainably. But at some point, the questions started coming up. Was he really making a difference to the health of the planet? Were some practices in conflict with others when it came to environmentally friendly choices? And could he really survive and thrive in a tiny house while pursuing the American dream? The one we all hope for, one in which our lives are fulfilling and our days are generally happy and we're not struggling to make ends meet. Michael introduced me to his podcast, In Over My Head, where he explores all of these questions and more. Before I was even done listening to the podcast trailer, I knew I wanted to talk with him on this show. Michael Bartz, welcome to the Slow Style Home podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Xandra.
Yeah, so we're just gonna jump right in. I am so curious. I'm trying to picture you in the weeks leading up to this, I would think, monumental decision to leave your career, to leave where you'd been living behind, and build on your own what is now referred to as a tiny house. So, what was going on in your head? What made you finally pull the trigger and make that decision?
Yeah, it definitely was a progressive thing. It started, this would have been about 2015, almost 10 years ago. And really the impetus for it was actually I had gotten out of an 8-year relationship that I was in. And then it became just me all of a sudden. It was like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm single now. I'm in my late 20s. I really had to ask myself, what does my life look like? What are my values? What do I want to do with my life? And also along with that, being that age, it's easy to question, do I need to own a home? Should I get a mortgage? What kind of house should I have? So those
Right.
questions were coming up. Is that what I want? But I wasn't really drawn to that. And then, yeah, this idea of a tiny house came up, and that was the start of it.
In the very beginning, there must have been so much, the learning curve must have been pretty tall. So tell us a little bit about the beginnings.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, there was lots and lots of learning to do. It actually is on a trailer, so it's on wheels. A lot of tiny houses are on wheels. And so that was the case with mine. I was renting my brother's house at the time, and I built it in the backyard.
Okay.
And that took, yeah, 4 years. And that was this whole journey in
Wow.
itself. And then,
Four
like, finding a
years.
place to park it is the whole other thing. So I don't know which
Okay.
direction you want to go, but
Yeah. Okay. So you're building it in your brother's backyard. First of all, did you have any carpentry experience or any house building experience?
a little bit. Like, yeah, after art school, I framed houses for a while.
Okay.
I thought maybe I want to be a carpenter. And like my dad taught me to weld when I was a teenager.
Oh,
He was a welder. So I was always handy, but this was definitely like a much, much bigger undertaking as far
of
as
course.
every element of the house that I was tackling.
You decide you're going to build this house. You have some skills. Are you on YouTube? How are you learning how to do all this stuff?
Yeah, it was a lot of that. It was, yeah, lots of YouTube at that time, reading lots of books on how to build a house. And
Yeah.
actually, I ended up probably the most impactful thing was I was doing this research. And at that time, I'd never actually been in a tiny house. I'd never really, yeah, seen what they actually that feels like.
Right.
So that would have been 2017. And at that time, it's called the National Tiny House Jamboree. It's in the States. And so that was in Colorado at that time. And so I took a road trip down to Colorado and went to the Jamboree, and it was essentially a convention of tiny houses.
Yeah.
There was about 40 tiny houses on display at that time. So that was really impactful for me to meet other people who were doing that and who were been through that journey. And also just to see what I love about tiny houses, mine included, is so many of them are self-built. It's very DIY. And with that comes so much sometimes like artistic expression. People were building
Yeah.
houses that really spoke to them and their values or their artistic pursuits. So that was a big part of the research side of things, is to actually see those houses, be in them, meet some people. And that really
Yeah.
lit a fire under me to pull the trigger and to start my
Wow.
own.
All right. So you get the house built and you've got to find a place to park it. And presumably you want your surroundings to also be giving something to you in terms of the aesthetic or the, I don't know, there's probably a lot of other considerations that you make about, like we all do, about where do we want to live? What's our neighborhood like? So how did you find where you are now and describe it for us?
So even like early on, when I thought about building this tiny house. And I was thinking about, yeah, what does my life look like? What are my values? Part of that was also like this community building idea that I had. And so I thought I want to live on someone else's property that would keep my cost of living low. And so I thought I want to maybe give back to maybe someone who was maybe a little bit older in that way, like maybe they need help in their walk or mowing their lawn or something.
I
And
love.
and my dad is a musician and he's in his 70s, and all of his people who listen to him are all that age. And just at the concert he was putting on one night, he just asked people like, who still gets the newspaper, like a physical paper? And like
Okay.
everyone's hands went up. I'm like, I guess this is the way I'm going to find an
Oh,
older family or something. So I'm
right.
just like putting an ad in the local newspaper, just
Oh,
saying,
that's so retro.
yeah, I have this. I didn't actually say tiny house, but I want to live on someone's property and I can help out. So in exchange, a community building idea. And I actually had quite a few responses. I was quite surprised, but it
Oh,
makes sense
wow.
because the house is more or less self-sufficient. So really it's
Yeah.
just I have a free place to park, but I'm also able to help. So they're not, it doesn't really cost them anything. So we met with a few people and there was this one couple. He's 87 now. So they're in their
Hmm.
80s and they're still farming. They live on a farm.
Mm.
Um, about a half an hour from the biggest city. That's where I built the house.
Hmm.
And yeah, and we've been there for over 3 years. I've learned so much from them. It's been so inspiring seeing someone of that age, so
Yeah.
mobile and so just has so much passion for their life. And also to,
Yeah.
answer your question about what it looks like. So it's in a big yard. There's lots of big trees. There's owls in the trees. Like
Oh,
there's lots of nature. So we really enjoy that aspect of it.
okay. But a quick question. What about plumbing and sewage and all that kind of stuff? How does that work on his land?
Yeah, yeah. So with the tiny house, because it's off grid, like there's a fresh and gray water tank that I put in the house. So it's
Uh-huh.
about 72 gallons. And so then I just haul water with a truck on the farm. And then there's a septic system that that water can go into. And then there's also a composting toilet that I put in the house.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about heating?
So it is heated with propane.
And do you have like solar panels on the top or anything?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I've
Yeah.
got solar panels on the top. That powers all the electricity. It is 12 volt and low voltage, high efficiency. And yeah, and one thing I actually ended up doing with the solar panels, they are on the roof, but I actually ended up putting a hinge system with them, so they actually go up and down, so I can track the
Yeah.
sun a bit better, especially in winter. That makes
Yeah.
quite a big difference in how much energy I can take in with the solar panels.
That's awesome. Okay. So pretty self-sufficient space. And you brought a partner in to live with you. And you have three cats. What's the square footage? And how did that work?
Yeah, it is 175 square feet. And so
Wow.
it's quite small. When I met my current partner, I had just started the build and it actually worked really well because she came to Canada from Spain. She had
Oh,
finished her PhD like in the orchard in Spain, like off grid, like living in this like small house that her dad built. So
oh,
moved over here with a suitcase and started working in research. And it was a natural attraction that I have this small house. She's used to living
yeah.
there. So really, we've actually made it work really well in the space. I'm actually surprised at how well we've adapted. Even once we moved into the house, like I tried to plan as much as I could. What would my life look like day to day? What do I actually need in this space, right? Because you can't have everything in 175 square feet.
Right.
And yeah, I was surprised that once we moved in, like even we made little adjustments, nothing major, but little adjustments to actually make the space just that much more efficient and work better. And yeah, with the cats as well, like one nice thing about cats is that with a tiny house, there's lots of different levels. There's behind me here, there's the stairs with a landing, there's the bedroom loft, we've got the cabinets up above the kitchen. And so there's lots of spaces for them to either go up high or go down
Yeah.
below and tuck down in. And
Right.
then actually once we had moved in, we wanted to put a cat door so they could get outside on the farm.
Yeah.
And Sarah wanted to put one in the main door, but I was concerned about that because it's like essentially one big space, right? So
Right.
we have very cold winters here in Canada, and I thought we're going to maybe lose a lot of heat. And so
Right.
I ended up actually just doing a bit of research online. And at one time I came across cat doors for like apartments and
Okay.
how they
Yeah.
had like doors on them. And I ended up just after the fact actually like building a cat door into the window of the bathroom. And so they can like
Oh,
hop up onto the sink and they just like hop out onto this ledge and then go down the ladder and
interesting.
explore the farm. And what's
Huh.
nice about that is the window can just close if it's really cold. So it
Right.
actually works really well. So we've actually accommodated quite well for two people and three cats.
Three cats. I love it. You definitely picked the right partner. She sounds like she knew what she was getting into. I love it. And what about work? Here you are, you're podcasting, and presumably she can't be home while you're doing that, or can she?
Yeah, no, like we were living in the tiny house like during the pandemic when we were both
Ah,
working from home, and that was yeah, that was quite surprising that we also yeah, we made it work as couples who stayed together did. But definitely
right.
was not in the plan of oh, we'll both work from home in this. Yeah, but thankfully we had the space on the farm to just go for a walk. There's lots of
Oh,
nature and
yeah.
things like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was an adjustment. But now it's she's back in the labs. I'm able to work from home a lot more easily.
Got
Yeah.
it. Okay. All right. What I want to spend the rest of our time talking about, you keep bringing up this word values, and that is a word that I use. It's one of my three principles of design that I teach in the slow style framework. And I'm pretty passionate about this aspect. Our homes reflect our values, whether or not we're intending them to. Whatever you're prioritizing in life, and even how you feel about yourself or the people that you live with or the people you bring into your home, all of that is going to be felt through your values, whether or not you value cleanliness or graciousness or organization or spirituality, culture, heritage, all of that kind of stuff. How we live our lives, we do live through our values, and you have been very intentional about that. So talk to us a little bit about the prevailing values that you knew you wanted to live by that needed to be reflected in your home.
Yeah, sustainability is a huge value for me. It's something that I'm very passionate about. And yeah, absolutely. Living in the small space that we do, having a lower physical footprint has a lower environmental footprint. And also, yeah, the off-grid nature of it, powering it with solar, using very little water, things like that.
And what have you found out? Let's get into the nitty gritty a little bit. I feel like a lot of us who are very aware of the limited natural resources we have on our planet, um, climate change, all of that, we want to do something. We get overwhelmed with all of the things we're told we should be doing or could be doing. And then sometimes that advice is in conflict. And you think about just electric cars, electric vehicles, for example, right? So we're all thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to solve the oil, natural gas problem. To come to find out, the batteries require lithium, and that's mining. And so there's a lot of things in conflict. So tell us a little bit about how you've managed that. What are some things that you've learned? What have you given up on, and what have you embraced? Whatever you want to share on that aspect.
For me, I found that yeah, you can't do everything because there are a thousand things you could do. I feel if you can just pick one thing that you want to do, whether it's reducing plastic in the ocean or it's, yeah, living in a tiny house or never driving again or never flying again, whatever it is, I'm like, pick that one thing and just go for it and think
Yeah.
big and just do that thing. And I think you'll be surprised at how much not only it changes you and opens your mind to what is possible, but how it can also inspire other people to think differently, and maybe they would choose their one thing to do. And that's, I think, potentially how we could actually have a bigger impact and
Mm.
get people to pay attention.
I love how you say it really focuses you. I think that's such great advice because then we don't get down rabbit holes about all of the other things or feel overly guilty about what we're not doing. And you just focusing on that one thing. That's so interesting. So for instance, if you want to reduce plastics, you could literally start finding all kinds of ways to do that. For instance, I just bought some no, not dishwasher soap, but hand washing for dishes. And it's this company called Ete, I think ETE, and they make a dishwashing soap that comes in a beeswax cylinder. So that is compostable. And then it's you just pour it into a glass bottle or a bottle that's going to be used over and over again with some hot water. And it is packaged in a cardboard box, but that is recyclable. But it really, you could do something like that and say, okay, I'm not just going to do it with dishwash soap. I'm going to do it with my shampoo, and I'm going to do it with my toothpaste and you look around the house, we just have so many plastics. So that could be someone's one thing. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah. And potentially you start with that one thing and it leads to something else. But I
Right.
find that's, a way just to keep it more manageable because without feeling overwhelmed or that you're not doing enough.
Yeah.
I had no idea when I started building this tiny house where that journey would lead me as far as the podcast and the experiences I've had with that. And
Right.
how, like, every time I meet someone now, if they know me, I'll get introduced at a social gathering and say, oh, here's Michael. He built his own tiny house. Like it just
Yeah.
becomes the thing that I am known for now.
Right, right,
And that's
right,
great. Yeah. For someone, it could be, yeah, plastic, or it could be they bike everywhere or whatever their
right.
thing is. And then when that becomes your identity, then that makes it a lot easier to do that thing because you're not having to make a conscious choice every time. Should I buy this or should I buy that or not do this or
Yeah,
not do that? So for me, that really helps to feel empowered.
absolutely. Another value you mentioned was creativity and the creativity that goes into building your own home and designing it literally for how you want to live from the ground up. So, talk to us a little bit about that. How has the building of the house and then the experience of living in it and on this land opened up your creative experiences?
So yeah, definitely it was a process in itself of just figuring out aesthetically what I want it to be. Yeah, how does this house feel for me? Is it going to inspire joy and make me feel good? And just the practical aspects of it. So yeah, it was very much a creative process for sure.
I know that you don't work in your previous career anymore, and you've mentioned at different
Mm.
times you feel like you have more time to
Mhm.
pursue
Yeah.
artistic things that, so talk to us a little bit about that.
And yeah, I was working in post-secondary, and I was honestly, although I enjoyed what I did and I enjoyed interacting with the students, I wasn't really doing what I was passionate about. I studied theater, I was an actor, and I wanted to do that more. I wanted to do other creative things. I know a lot of artists, they just have the realities of expenses. And if you live in
Sure.
a big New York city or something like that, cost of living is very high. So you oftentimes do another job. What I've found with living in my tiny house, the way that we are living, is yeah, like yes, it frees up more time, but a lot of times it's actually just the financial side of things
Right.
that I'm in a place now where I'm probably a lot further ahead because I've only been doing this podcast and things like that 3 years or so. I have total autonomy over my workday, being self-employed. I can say yes to certain projects or not. I can spend a lot of time on one project and make it really good and focus on that quality. And I'm not as burdened by just, yeah, is that going to make me enough money and the rat
Mhm.
race? And so it went together that way. And then that I'm living this way, I'm living my values, and that also allows me to do that creative work, and which has also inspired me more and fueled me more, and I want to do it more. So they support each other that way.
Sounds like you really do feel the relief of not having the financial pressures. You really, the impact is very tangible to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it has been a choice. Like I'm making a lot less money overall than I was previously, but it actually doesn't matter as much anymore because the actual amount, like I have enough to live and that's all I need, and that's fine. So yeah, it just takes that gas pedal off. It's slowing down and being more intentional. And
Right.
yeah, it just completely changed how I just view work and how I view my time. I spend a lot of times in the morning, I'll read for sometimes an hour in the morning. I'll read
Mm.
a book a week or every 2 weeks.
Luxurious.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
people say that they might say it's luxurious, sure, but it's also been a choice, right? I've chosen to
Yeah.
live this way and slow down and focus on those things and yeah, make less money. But that also means meal planning. That also means really budgeting very carefully. So there's other factors, but by doing those things, and I'm very used to it now, living with less, happily with less, I think there's a lot more time for the things that matter. And that's something that really interests me just as a person, and even with my show to a certain degree is, yeah, what is the good life, right? I've talked about that a bit on my show. Yeah. Is it the stuff or is it actually time with people and time for artistic endeavors? And I think the more people could do that, I think they'd be a lot more fulfilled.
I want to talk a little bit about the stuff. Obviously, you have to be very careful about what you bring into your home, and it has to deserve every single square inch it takes up. How much thought have you and your partner given to the aesthetic? Do you think about what you're surrounding yourself with and whether or not, or what kind of emotional impact it might have on you?
Yeah, no, that's a good question for sure. It's a very modern aesthetic. And for me, yeah, that's just what I enjoy and what my partner enjoys. We're not like, there's not a lot of like busyness and a lot of things. And so I find that, yes, we have to be intentional about the things we bring in. But I also find that just the house itself, because I built it myself, I see it as an artistic piece. So it's like recycled oak hardwood from the farm. That's amazing. It just looks amazing. I don't need to
Right,
clutter it up with other things. So I find
right.
that I just appreciate the house itself. we don't have to have a lot of other things around, and just practically just have to keep the space pretty tidy, pretty clean, and just free of clutter.
What's one thing that you do have in your home purely for pleasure? It had to make the cut. You have to live with it.
The one thing that comes to mind, I do, like I said, I enjoy reading. A lot of times I'll have books in the house, and I definitely had to decide what books do I actually want to keep. So in the living room where I'm at now, there is two very small shelves that we've dedicated to books, and some of them are like hiking books, and then some of them are just other nonfiction books. And so I guess that's one thing that like I've kept some books that I just really enjoy rereading. The whole thing of me living in a tiny house too, like I mentioned, that community building aspect. It's also about not everything has to be in the house. So I go to the public library and I get books all the time, and then I just bring them back, and that way I can enjoy them, but they don't actually stay in the house. But there are a few that I've purchased that I keep, and yeah, they're, I guess they're not necessary, but I do get a lot of joy out of them.
I think that's such a great answer because I feel like looking at people's bookcases, especially if you don't know them very well, is a great way to get to know someone. Because you're seeing all of their varied interests right there on display. But even more so for you, if I were to come into your home and look at those two small shelves, it would tell me not just what you're interested in, but what you're really passionate about and what must mean something to you, either represents something about you or something that you're doing on a daily basis because they made the cut. They have earned your respect. That's such a great answer. So we talked about sustainability as a value. We talked about creativity as a value. Let's talk a little bit more about community. You probably don't have people over for dinner, or maybe not very often. What about socializing? And do you find that you do all of that outside the house?
Yeah, no, yeah, that's a valid question for sure, especially in such a small space. And yeah, absolutely. We don't have a lot of big dinner parties in the tiny house. And yeah, if I'm being honest, sometimes being on the farm, it can be a bit isolating because a lot of our friends are in the city. One nice thing is, at least in summertime, there's lots of green space. So more and more we have people outside. We got a
Yeah,
big table and lots of chairs.
outdoor dinner parties. I love it.
And I do find it is more of an experience for them because maybe they don't come out to the farm all the time. You get to just see the owls, you get to see the stars. If you stay out late at night, you can have campfires. So it becomes
Yeah.
more of that experience for them. And then a lot of times we will go into the city and spend time with our friends there and in their houses. So a little bit of back and
Your
forth.
friends are lucky to have you. I would love to be able to say, oh, yeah, this weekend we're going to go watch the stars and have no light pollution bothering us.
Right.
And
Yeah.
oh, that's great. Okay, I want to wrap up by asking you pros and cons. What would you say to someone who is starting to consider something like this? And it could be someone who, I know families have tiny houses. They're maybe a little bit bigger because there's more people, but I think this is particularly interesting for people who maybe are younger or empty nesters, people who are looking for a new adventure. So pros and cons.
I think there are a lot of advantages of decluttering and just having less space just physically. It does take a lot less time to clean. As we've talked about, you are very intentional with the things you have in your home, what you keep, what you don't. And one thing I actually really like about the tiny house is also like all those like nooks and crannies too. The bedroom loft or this the space in the living room, and it's actually the living room actually converts into a queen size guest bed, so we can actually host people.
Oh, wow.
And so also just like having those cozy little nooks and crannies. You can have those in regular houses, but I find it's especially fun in the tiny house. And also just for me, it's also just figuring out actually what you do need day to day and what you can get rid of. And so there's a lot of weight lifted that way. So those are some of the pros I can think of. Yeah, cons, it really depends on, again, how off grid you are. The more off grid you are, the more you're going to have to spend time on your house. So we have to be checking the battery. So does the solar panels charge the batteries? Where's the power at? How much water do we have? So it's not just, oh, I'm going to have a 15-minute shower and then hit the road and go to work if someone's going to work.
Yeah.
If it's low, I have to now fill it. And this is a whole process of getting the truck and getting the water. And
Yep.
it takes probably an hour. And so those kind of things are a consideration. And if you heat it with wood, I know some people who do, you're going to have to chop that wood into very small pieces and you're going to have to be stoking the fire. And it can be very romantic. And people think, oh, it's going to be so great. But the off grid nature really can take a lot of your time. So
Right.
to be prepared for that, I guess that could be a bit of a con if someone's not ready for that. But if they are just plugged in, they're in someone's backyard, maybe they're using that house, the facilities there a bit, it can be a lot less daunting that way. Yeah.
Okay, and so is there anything that you wish you had known or that you would do differently if you were going to do this again now that you have all this experience?
I think we talked about when I went to Colorado for the Tiny House Jamboree, there were a lot of different styles of houses. And I thought with mine, like again, I didn't know where I was going to be. I thought I wanted to be quite mobile. So I did build it within the essentially RV specifications for width most and
Yep,
height to a certain degree. And so that way I could move it without a permit. At the very
right.
beginning, I had these like ideas go across Canada
Yeah.
and actually so far we've just moved it once from where I built it
Okay.
in town to the farm. And so knowing that now potentially would have actually built it wider. I remember seeing
Uh-huh.
in Colorado, there was one, I think it was 12 feet wide, like it was quite
Oh,
wide,
yeah,
whereas mine
right.
on the inside's about 7.5 feet outside.
Yeah,
And I found like that makes a really big difference in how the space feels, how you can use the
sure.
space. Like I said, we have that queen size guest bed. It gets a bit tight when you have two people and their suitcases, and it's
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
right.
okay, that would be like one big change that I
Yep.
probably would seriously consider, which would make the space just that much more adaptable. So a little bit bigger wouldn't be the end of the world.
So would you then recommend knowing where you're going to land before you start building? Like, you did it, the order in which you did it was build the house first, then find the land.
Hmm. Yeah, like in some ways, yeah, it would be good. I remember one fellow reached out to me and I'm gonna try to get this spot on this, I think it was a farm or an acreage or something like us, but he hadn't built the tiny house yet. And I guess one thing with that is unless you own the land and you know that, okay, I'm gonna be here and we're gonna build this house, it can be a bit tricky because it's maybe the person changes their mind or that idea falls through. So I guess, yes, in hindsight, it would be nice to know that, okay, we're going to be on this piece of land and we have access to water or power, or we don't, or we're going to be in the middle of nowhere. So, yeah, knowing ahead of time, ideally, that really allows you to plan for your tiny house and
To
also potentially
customize,
reduce
yeah.
costs because a big cost is the off-grid nature. Not off-grid, like you're going to reduce your cost a lot. So definitely that is a factor, but I still think the if you build it, they will come thing. I guess that if you have it, then at least it's done, and then you can take it somewhere. That's a lot easier to do than to have this hypothetical thing and then
Yeah,
maybe the deal falls through. Yeah,
that's
those are
true.
some thoughts.
And let's not forget that you were very smart in how you went about finding a land and a partner, so to speak, with the farmer whose land that you're on, going to the newspaper. And I love the intergenerational aspect of it. I think a lot of people are starting to really think about the benefits of living intergenerationally. And you've already got that nailed down. So that's very cool. Your podcast, again, it's called In Over My Head. And I think that is a terrific resource for anyone who is considering doing this or people who just want to think more deeply about their impact on the planet, on your little plot of earth that you are settling down on. Thank you so much for this fun conversation. And I'm really glad that I got to know you a little bit and your tiny home.
Yeah, thanks so much, Sandra. It's been really fun chatting with you.